In this video, we're going to do a quick review of the distributive property and what exactly that means. So if you look in your notebooks, when we took the notes on distributive property, you should know that the distributive law says that multiplying a number by a group of numbers added together is the same as doing each multiplication separately. Now that's just a fancy way of saying, say for example, I had a problem like this. All right. So using the distributive method, let's just say I multiplied 8 by my two inside numbers. I'm going to have 48, and I'm going to have 24. And if I subtract these and actually solve it, I'm going to get 24 as my answer. Now, if I use this same problem, so the same problem 6 times 8 minus 3, and I actually solved what was inside first, I'm going to get the same answer. So in this case, when we have a coefficient on the outside of our parentheses, it's not going to change what's on the inside. We're still going to get the same answer. Now, in terms of doing this with variables, it changes a little bit. Now, here I have 5 groups of h plus 10. So instead of adding h plus 6 5 separate times, because that's going to take way too long, I'm just going to multiply. So 5 times h, and 5 times 6 is going to give me 5 h's, plus 5 times 6 is just going to give me 30. Now, in our next example, you need to be careful because sometimes there's some negatives and there's some subtraction signs hanging around. Now here, it's not going to be too complex because here we're just going to multiply 3 by w, which gives us just regular old 3w. And then 3 times minus 8 is going to give us minus 24. So the main misconception I see when students are solving these problems is that they forget the sign. So you want to make sure that you're very aware of the original problem and to carry that sign, which means a negative or a positive, minus or plus, down with you once you distribute. Now, there are times where our coefficient, that number on the outside, is negative, and we have to keep that in mind when multiplying things on the inside. So here, for example, when we use the distributive method, if I have negative 4 times a, that's going to give me negative 4a, and then I'm going to have minus negative 4 times positive 7, that's going to give me negative 28. Whoops. That's going to give me negative 28. And then here, because I have two negatives together, we should remember from our positive and negative section that this is just going to be positive. So I'm still going to have my negative 4a, and then here, because there's two negatives, this turns into plus 28. So next we're actually going to get into some examples of solving with the distributive method. So in this example, we have 8 times u plus 2 equaling 40. And I'm going to distribute this 8 as I would normally do. So I have 8u, and then 8 times positive 2 is going to be 16. And that's going to be equal to 40. Now, you have to remember that on each side of my equation, I want my variables and my constants. And sometimes I refer this to bags and coins, but really these are just variables and constants. So what I'm going to want to do here is subtract this by 16 in order to cancel this out, because I want to isolate my u. I just want to figure out what u is. So on this side of my equation, I'm just going to have 8u. And then next over here, what I'll be doing is I'm subtracting by 16. That's going to give me 24. So my last step, I have my variables on one side, my constants on the other, or I might say in class, my bags on one side, coins on the other. I'm just going to divide by 8. Now this cancels out the 8's, but I still have that u there. So I'm going to have u equal to 24 divided by 8 is 3. And if I want to, I can even double check my answer by replacing the u with the 3. So on the exam, you don't have to necessarily do this, but this is a nice way to double check your answer. So instead of having the u here, I'm going to put 3 plus 2 equals 40. And I'm just going to solve this as I regularly would. I'm going to either combine these or I can use the distributive method. So I think for this one, I'm just going to add these two together. So 8 times 5 equals 40. And I know that 8 times 5 is 40. And if both of these answers are the same, then I know I solved this correctly, that u is actually 3. Now, in this next example, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to distribute my coefficient 6. So I'm going to have 6k plus 60. And again, you want to make sure that you distribute all throughout the brackets, or I'm sorry, the parentheses. A lot of common misconception that I see is that some people will get the 6k and they'll drop down the 10 because they forget to multiply. So make sure that you multiply both of these. So once I multiply that, I know that's equal to 48. And from here, what I'm going to do is a lot of people are going to want to subtract by 48 because that makes this nice. But what ends up happening is you end up getting 0 on this side. And I'm just going to have 6k equaling, or I'm sorry, 6k plus 12. But now I can't divide by anything because I don't have anything here to divide by. So you want to avoid that. Remember, you want to make sure that your variables stay on one side and your constants, your just regular old numbers, stay on the other. So what I'm going to do instead of subtracting by 48 is I'm actually going to get rid of the 60 by subtracting by 60. And because I'm adding by 60 and then subtracting by 60, this is canceled out. So I have 6k on my left side. And that's equal to negative 12 on this side, because 48 minus 60 gives me negative 12. And as always, once I have my variables on one side and my constants on the other, I divide by 6, and I should see here that k equals negative 2. And again, I can just quickly check this by replacing my k with negative 2. 6 times negative 2 plus 10 should equal 48 if I did this correctly. Negative 2 plus 10 is going to give me 8. 6 times 8 equals 48. And it looks like 48 equals 48. So I know I solved this one correctly as well. We're going to go through one more example. So here this problem's a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, I want to distribute this 9. So I'm going to have 9g plus 2, oops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake myself. So remember, you're going to want to multiply the 9 by the 2, which is going to be 18, which is equal to 3g minus 6. So there isn't any distributive method on this side, so I'm just going to recopy this. And then here, I'm going to solve the problem as I regularly would. So I'm going to subtract by 3g. And I can do that because I have variables on my left side and on my right side. So I minus 3g. This gives me 6g plus 18 equals negative 6. Watch out for that negative. You want to make sure that you remind yourself that it's still there. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this 18 by subtracting by it, because I don't want to add 6 here because I want to keep some constants on this side. So minus 18. Minus 18. And now that I'm subtracting a negative by another negative, what's going to happen is I'm going to get an even bigger negative. So I'm going to have minus 24, 6g, and lastly, I'll just divide. Divide by 6, divide negative 24 by 6. I'm going to get that g is equal to negative 4. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Schoology.